down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and then I point at the camera like they do like on TV shows, because like you want to get the sound recording, so they just like say 2 and then they point. And I pointed, but you guys can't see my camera. And you can only see my camera if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you so much for coming back. This is Brainstorm Brewery, episode 300. We're definitely not to the 350s yet, right? Because that would mean we've been podcasting for 7 years, and it's too many years to be doing.
We've already been podcasting for 7 years.
Have we?
Yeah. The anniversary was like in March or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense, because we did like episode 199 and 199.1 and yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming back and joining us. I'm your host, Jason Alt. I'm joined by 2 guests today. That's double your guestage, double your fun. My first guest is a longtime guest of this podcast. You know him as Douglas DJ Johnson. Doug, why don't you say hello and tell everybody what you do in the community?
Hi there, it's glad to be on. This is my first time on this cast, actually, and I am a buyer for 95 MTG at the whatever North American Magic Fest that you are at. I have a TCG player store under the name Card Garden. You may have bought from me in the past, and I'm currently playing through Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the first time, and I'm very much enjoying it. It is well-deserved Game of the Year 2017.
Man, we don't need to know your whole life. And our other guest joining us.
I'm Ed. You guys can find me on Twitter at EdNguyen13. I usually work with Tales of Adventure at Magic Fest in the US. I also have a TCG player store that I'm not keen on giving the name away for. And I'll be in Dallas this weekend. You guys may have seen me before. I also am one of the co-hosts for Cartel Aristocrats.
And I'm one of the co-hosts for Cartel Aristocrats, too.
That's great.
But,
I thought you quit Cartel Aristocrats to be on this podcast.
No.
And that's why you'll never be a full-fledged host. Everybody, we have a lot to talk about today. We have 2 people who sell a lot of cards at Magic Fest, and they buy a lot of cards at Magic Fest, and that's going to be a lot of information for you, because you're like, hey, how do I do the thing? Well, they know about the thing. We also want to talk about Core Set 2020, because that's the thing. And the Mythic Championship. So We're going to get right down to business.
We don't need to talk about the Mythic Championship because Corbin's not here. Corbin's not here because he can't poop.
Yeah, that's literally true. It's like, they're probably... No.
Yeah,
he's backed up like this episode's backed up on brainstormbrewery.com, where you can check out all the past episodes and... That wasn't even a pitch for anything that matters. No one goes to our website, but whatever.
So I have a fun little story about my adventures buying and selling on Facebook Marketplace. So I use Facebook and Craigslist to sell a lot of my bulk commons and uncommon leftovers that I pick through, and just sort of like leave the ad up, and every now and again I sell like $30-$40 worth of commons and uncommons in my basement. And it's just like a nice way to keep cards out of my basement. And
so why don't you give us a little information? I know it's like you're trying to tell a story, but why don't you tell us like how you do that, like what increments, what the ad's like,
that sure.
Kind of stuff.
So I have 2 listings up currently. One of them is for commons and uncommons, and it's $6 per 1,000 cards. I generally prefer if people spend at least $30. Otherwise, I just try to keep the transaction very, very short and brief. But I pick out commons and uncommons. I pull out all the 25 cent, the 50 cent goodies that go off to buy lists. And then the remaining, which are just random assorted commons and uncommons from revised to now, they're very, very good for bulk listings. They're very good for new players who just want like a big hunk of cards to build casual unsleeved decks with. And that is most of the people who I get messages from. And I have a listing for rares that is... it is $13 per 100 rares. So that's average of 13 cents a bulk rare. And those sell pretty well on Facebook too. And I just have people meet me, and then I give them magic cards, and then they give me money. And then every now and again, I make a long-term customer out of it. There's been a couple people who just consistently come back, and then they start buying singles from me as they slowly get re-ingrained into the standard or modern or commander or what have you. So it's just a nice little multifaceted tool to work as like a marketing thing, or just get a little bit extra money and turn useless cards into not useless money. But every now and again, I get the message from the I don't even know what to describe them as, but like the wannabe highballer, like I got cash money, how much for everything you got, yo, what's up, like you know the person I'm talking about. Just
Yep.
like the person who thinks that they're hot stuff and that they can buy your entire collection. And so I got a message from one of those when I was in DC last weekend, and they said, "Would you sell in huge bulk? How much for all?" in all caps. And then I did my little spiel of like, if you want every single common and uncommon I have, I'll drop the price to $5 per thousand. I think there's around 200,000 cards total, but I can get a closer estimate when I'm home. So that's be 20% off your final purchase. And then they said I was looking to pay $200 for everything. And I replied with, there's roughly 200,000 cards. And then they said, so help me out with math here. If there's 200,000 cards at $5 per thousand, that's ... And then they sent me a screenshot of their calculator on their phone. And that number that their calculator shows says $1 million. So they did a slight miscalculation in the math. And they're like, right? Question mark. And I said, that would mean 1,000,000 pennies. You are looking at roughly 1,000 USD. And then they asked for another discount down to $500 for everything. So on top of the 20% off I already gave them. And then they said, oh, I was looking to spend $200 at most. And then they ghosted me when I tried to meet up with them. So that's about how most of my transactions on Facebook go. I do get a slight amount of personal satisfaction and entertainment out of dealing with these types of people, but it's just a nice little way to pass the time sometimes when I'm...
That story sucked. That guy didn't use a racial slur and then ask you for a ride.
I know. It's not my best work. My favorite was when I got asked to trade for a gun. I think I've told that story on the podcast before, but somebody offered to trade me, I believe it was a 22 crack shot long rifle is what they described it as. And then they sent me a picture of a very, very dirty old rifle that they wanted to trade for Magic cards, and I politely declined.
It would be a good way to have your murder weapon with someone else's fingerprints on it.
and registered serial number.
Yes.
Allegedly.
Are we not assuming that that would be scratched off on this kind of thing?
If you could still read it. All right. So buying and selling is weird. Maybe you want a crack shot long rifle if you're going to go meet somebody. I recommend doing it in public and not giving the person a ride. But hey, do as I say, not as I do, right? So, Craigslist and that kind of stuff is weird. I have every app on my phone. I have Let Go. I have Craigslist. I have all the stuff, the other ones for buying and selling. And I have alerts to tell me when someone lists something that says Magic. So I get a lot of Magic cards. I get a lot of...
You get a lot of like the Magic Johnson shoe listings.
Yeah, Magic Johnson stuff, especially in Michigan. I get a lot of Magic Chef appliances and, Magic school bus
like
stuff.
My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic.
I also buy Pokemon cards, but I don't really know how, so I just tell people that I pay $5 per thousand on bulk, and then I look up anything holographic, and that has served me pretty well, because the bulk rate is more than $5 per thousand, so I've never lost money on a Pokemon collection.
Correct.
Okay, you guys want to get this show on the road? You want to talk about the stuff? I think let's break up all the discussion by playing a game first. This is a guessing game that we like to call Breaking Bulk.
Breaking bulk time. Breaking bulk time. Break.
Oh, yeah, Breaking Bulk. There's so much good stuff.
It's a pick. Breaking bulk. The end.
Where we talk about a card that everybody thinks is bulk, but isn't really, and we get the other people on the cast to guess, because that's a thing we like to do. So I guess I'll show everyone how the game works if you're new to the podcast by going first. I have a card from Saviors of Kamigawa that is a green common.
Sakura Tribe Scout.
You said last night that you didn't hear what I said, but you clearly did.
Nope. That's just the only green common in that set that's worth anything, I think.
Well, it's worth quite a lot.
It is worth a lot.
What Sakura Tribe Scout does is you tap it to put a land card from your hand into play, and if you're a degenerate, you use Retreat to Coral Helm to untap it, and then you just dump your hand. So Sakura Tribe Scout is in bulk all the time. It should not be. People have this perception, I guess from back in the day when there was Pithing Needle and then a bunch of garbage in that set, but now every rare from Saviors of Kamigawa is worth $10 because of EDH. And,
well, I mean, Soccer Tribe Scout specifically is a modern card. That's an Amulet Titan card.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's one that you like actually can put in your binder and bring to a GP, and there will be vendors and players alike who want to buy your Soccer Tribe Scouts for use in a modern tournament. It's fine in ADH, but it's also just like a constructed staple as a 4 of.
Yep, it's it's just a very, very useful card that's a useful ability. And it's not the only time that's been on a creature, but like it's one of 2 1-mana 1/1s. And it's the only one that's legal in modern.
Well, there's another one that's legal in modern, but the other one is sorcery speed.
I think.
I think there's another 1-mana 1/1 that is also in modern. I think it's in 10th edition. It's an elf or something like that, but it's sorcery speed. Because that's like the budget one, because Soccer Tribe Scout's $3, and there's like a budget garbage one.
There's Llanowar Scout, which is 2 mana for a 1/3, and then there's
I want to see Norwood Ranger or Norwood something.
Yeah, I can't find it, but yeah, there was like a card from Tempest that got reprinted in like 10th edition. So, yep, pick your Soccer Tribe Scouts out of bulk, and I would recommend just...
It's not Norwood Ranger.
Yep. I would recommend just like looking stuff up. I tend to overpick and look it up later rather than underpicking, because if you underpick and then you figure out something's worth money later, you got to dig back through all the stuff that you already did, and rework sucks. It's easy to take a pile of worthless cards and throw them back in bulk versus pull something out that was worth money. So if you have to just have like a master buy list up and maybe do a rough set sort or something, I don't know how you want to do it, but definitely I overpick, and I think that's the play, because I don't send people 17 Sakura Tribe Scouts in a bulk order like someone just did to me, and that's why I picked this card. So pick out $3 cards out of bulk, you dummies.
Yeah, I mean,
Who's
I think that just to follow up a little bit, I think that one of the best ways, if you have been out of the game for an extended period of time and want to relearn the bulk game, is to just go based on whatever the majority of the sets that your bulk is. So if you buy like a bunch of bulk and it's RTR to Cons of Kirkir, that's like 8 sets that you just have to skim through really quick on either MTG stocks or Card Kingdom buy list. And it's not super difficult to just like memorize the top 5 or 10 cards from those. And then you can start to recognize patterns. So like with the Cons of Kirkir set, it's like, okay, Monastery, Swift Spear, Brave the Sands, then every Tri-land and every Gainland. And then that's like the majority of the cards in that set. And then you can go to Fate Reforged and be like, okay, it's Gurmag Angler, Temur Battle Rage, and the dumb tiger thing.
Temur Sabertooth.
Yeah. So, like, you can get a general, like, pretty rough idea of the valuable cards in each set and the patterns within each set just by, like, set sorting. Because most of the time when you buy bulk, it's not, like, 15 years of cards completely randomized. There's patterns to what years the bulk is.
Yep, because it's like, hey, here's the years I bought, like, a couple booster boxes. Or did a ton of drafts. Playable cards? Just pick out playable cards, right? If it was playable in standard, chances are it's worth a nickel or more, after it rotates. And yeah, that's Breaking Bulk. DJ, do you have a Breaking Bulk pick to get me to guess?
Onslaught Blue Uncommon. 1 reprint.
Is it a wizard?
No.
1 reprint.
Correct.
Uncommon?
Yep.
Mistform Chief?
Not a creature.
Oh. Chain of Vapor.
Correct.
Nice.
Chain of Vapor is it was reprinted in a commander precon, but it is still worth a surprising amount of money. It is 1 mana instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Then that permanent's controller may sacrifice a land. If that player does, he or she may copy the spell and choose a new target. So you can go back and forth, sacking lands, bouncing things between each other, but it's just a nice little 1 mana instant speed answer to some threatening things, or maybe a big indestructible angel, or just something that's hard to get rid of. Like, you just 1 mana instant, bounce it, and you can buy with Chain of Vapor, either the Onslaught one or the Commander one, for almost $1, sometimes a little over $1. I know that this is just like a... It's okay, we can cut that out.
Sorry.
That's fine.
No, we can just cut it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So yeah, Chain of Vapor is just
that
a little...
I'm sorry, is that a landline? That sounded like a landline.
I'm at my parents' house. There's a landline here. Why my parents have gotten rid of it?
Oh, the answering machine got it.
Oh,
they have a landline and an answering machine. That's cool.
Yeah, like this is my parents' house.
Are they gonna get a fucking fax next? Like,
I've actually had to fax something fairly recent. I still have a fax machine behind me, actually.
nice.
So
nice.
I probably use it about once a year.
For what?
To fax documents?
Hey, I have to fax documents occasionally, and I use a combination printer scanner that I bought with the money from our patrons who go to patreon.com/Brainstorm Brewery.
Anyways, before I cut you off, Chain of Vapor. Buy this thing for $1.
Yes, that's all that can be said about it. It is just a nice little card to find in bulk. You are probably more likely to find the Commander version just because you're more likely to find the Commander version. But pick them both.
Unless you find yourself getting a lot of Onslaught bulk, in which case, congrats on all your money.
I actually have one. This is one that actually came up for me probably about last week or something. I didn't realize it. It is in Plane Chase. It has one other printing in a set. It is a black uncommon. I did not realize that it's pushing close to $5. And I feel like part of it may be resurgent due to cards that are in Modern Horizons. Yes. It is in Betrayers or Saviors.
Betrayers are the ninjas.
It's in Throwing Star of Kamigawa.
Yes.
Throwing Star of Kamigawa.
Betrayers, the first Plane Chase, and then Plane Chase Anthologies. It's an uncommon, all three of those. I do wonder if more ninjas in Modern Horizons has kind of pushed some of these cards up.
Yep.
Yeah, it probably increases demand for it, but these
Throat Slitter is it's been a perennial favorite. I think we've picked it a couple times on Breaking Bulk.
Yeah, but I mean, it keeps going up, too.
Did we have an episode called Mothers Won't Let Their Kids Buy Throat Slitters?
Oh, yeah, that was one of the first little tidbits of wisdom that Thomas Dodd gave me like a few years ago, is because his buy list on all the Kamigawa ninjas was great, except for Throat Slitter, because it was like $1 back then, and he only wanted to give me a dime for it, and I just passed. And then he said, yeah, parents won't let their kids buy cards named Throat Slitter. So it's not much of an Amazon amazing card, which is one of the platforms he sells on a lot, and Amazon's a marketplace where a lot of the time it is like parents buying cards for kids or letting their kids use a credit card or gifts and stuff like that. But Throat Slitter was not hot on Amazon for a while. It might be now just because it's more casual adults buying ninja precons. But
I don't know. It's owned by Hasbro. I wonder if they're gonna Hasbro it up and like instead of Throat Slitter they could call it Angry Birds or something. Rock'em Sock'em Ninjas. There's a third Hasbro joke in there. Maybe something Yelly related. They have a Yelly called Bojangles. And I was like, that's a little close to Bojangles. And now I want chicken.
Oh, their master marketing scheme has caught you in its web, Jason. It's a lot.
I wondered if Yellies taste like chicken, and now I'm thinking about Yellies.
So many 2 in the morning hours spent by that one marketing guy hunched over his desk, letting his wife get railed by some other dude, just to create a Bojangles Yelly. And you finally fell for it and validated his overtime. Congratulations.
Okay, no, I figured out their marketing scheme, right? They call it in Bojangles, which makes people think of Bojangles, which makes a certain number of people think about chicken, which makes people think about Unglued, so they go and buy old Unglued stuff from the Hasbro website.
Yep.
It's like I need a few more of these for my Chicken Ala King chicken tribal deck.
And if you look at the correct angle of the sundial at 2:00 in the afternoon, and then hold up a dollar bill to the light, and then like it'll shine a reflection of a clue on the stone wall near the Liberty Bell, right?
You're a national treasure, DJ. I hope you're kidnapped by Nicolas Cage someday.
Thank you, Jason. That's an honor.
Is that all of Breaking Bulk? Did we do it?
I think we just beat the game. As long as we end with a Nicolas Cage reference at the end of his segment, we don't have to do this segment again for like a while.
So Corbin's not good at anything on this podcast except knowing when to transition to the next segment. And I'm not really sure, but I'm just going to guess that it's time to talk about our next segment, which is Finance 101. It's a some people are like, hey, I like the podcast because it's entertaining, but I started listening around episode 290, and I think you assumed that everyone had been listening the whole time, so you never talked about easy finance stuff again, and I'm lost. You guys are fun, but I don't know anything about finance, and I don't think I'm going to learn from you. So we decided to go back and talk about some pretty basic stuff, some Finance 101 topics for new people to the finance game, or for people who don't really care about finance. They just like our podcast, and they're like, oh, hey, I just got the idea to pick a bunch of bulk, and now I have $80 I didn't know I had. Or if you just, could use a refresher. We're going to talk about a topic today. DJ, why don't you tell everyone what the Finance 101 topic is?
Yeah, so I think that one of the suggestions we give people a lot of the time around set releases is to wait until the mass supply hits the market. So when the fall set comes out, when Kaladesh hits, when Ixalan hits, when whatever standard set Dominaria comes out, people freak out because certain cards are very expensive. It's like, oh my god, card is $60. What do I do? And the answer is wait. Most of the time, it's just like, wait 3 weeks, wait for the distributors to get their product into the stores, wait for the stores to get their product to the hands of the players. Players will crack stuff, wait till the limited GP happens, and then there's a whole bunch of cards everywhere. All the vendors race to the bottom, and then you just have your $15 cards, and everything's okay. And people asked us about the same thing for Modern Horizons, and Modern Horizons turned out a little differently than most sets because of one pretty glowing reason, and that is because we already have the entire set for Core Set 2020. We had a few weeks of people getting hyped up about Modern Horizons, Hogax destroying the world, and then everybody
Ren 6 is $60?
Yeah, and I mean, the same advice for wait until the bottom hits might not necessarily be true about this one. And I mean, Ed was on the floor at GP Seattle, so he has more of a finger on the pulse of the buy list at that particular event, so I can let him take it away from here.
So without going too much into details of the event itself, it being a 4-day event means that there was a lot of opportunity for people to play inside events, open a product from the prize wall. There were 2 main events because they had both day ones on Friday and Saturday. If you played on Friday and you made day 2, you were still free to play again. I had a few friends that opted to play day 2 to try and improve on their X3 or X2 record. It's a very good marketing ploy from Channel Fireball by doing this. It gets a lot more hype into the set. It gets a lot of people who are opening up the product that they might not otherwise open. But due to Seattle having
so this was a limited event then?
It was a Modern Horizons limited event, yes. Due to a lot of hype building around it, we had a lot of international vendors come in. I think of the 20 vendors that were there, there was one vendor who didn't show up, and 5 or 6 international vendors. And those are the vendors who are trying to buy cards here and take them back to their own country to sell. Those are cards that when they buy them, they're just completely disappearing from the US market. Whereas vendors such as Cool Stuff, Strike Zone, Tales of Adventure, etc., when these stores buy them, they're trying to put them back into the market. They're buying them from the GP. Cool Stuff case, they go back to Florida, they put cards into their 5 or 6 locations, they sell cards online. Same with Strike Zone, same with Tails, etc. So those cards more or less get recycled. But yeah, when you have a lot of...
like Channel too, they just go back to San Diego. They go on Channel's online store, and then most of Channel's customers are based within the U.S. And that sort of leads back to last week's episode. We talked about arbitrage, and if you missed that one, that was a really good discussion. Post DC about like how arbitrage works and what you like, just sort of the general overview of why somebody would pay TCG low on a card at a GP.
Right, and so without a lot of these stores more or less redistributing product to the market, the large amount of cards are basically getting sucked down, removed from the economy, makes it so that the prices are being driven up. And once vendors started to realize that they couldn't get the quantities that they need to meet demand at their store, they have to raise buy prices. And in turn, if they're raising buy prices, they naturally have to be charging more for their sell prices when these cards actually do get out. And contrary to what happens at most GPs, a lot of hot buy lists don't aren't retained over the weekend. They usually slowly creep downwards, especially during limited events, during release weekends.
I mean, like, me and Ed were both right next to each other at DC. We both started buying Force of Negation at 30, I think it was. And then we dropped it to 25, then we dropped it to 22. Like, as just, we got so many. We got so many Force Negations. It's like, all right, we can't pay this much anymore. Drop it a little bit, drop it a little bit, drop it a little bit. But that is not what happened in Seattle, apparently.
Yes, in Seattle, once it became clear that the vendors who won these copies of cards, once they couldn't get the quantities that they needed, they started to slowly raise the buy price. What this causes in turn is other vendors not being able to get the cards they want, so they're forced to raise their buy price in order to compete, and it creates this small arms race. And once people started to realize that, hey, if a vendor is paying... by the time Sunday rolled around, Ren and 6 was up to $40 on buy lists. I imagine people started to go out and realize that, hey, this card isn't getting cheaper. I probably need to go buy my copies now. So as a result, you saw a lot of the cheap copies of Ren and 6 disappear on TCG Player, and now the card's like $55, $56, pushing $60.
Ren and 60.
So that was more or less the summary of Seattle without going too much more into it. This is one of like the very, very few times I've actually seen buy lists go up over the course of the weekend. And that just speaks a lot to how much the set is actually out there and available, and how much demand there is for these cards, especially the top tier premium ones like the Horizon Lands, Ren and 6, Prismatic Vista, etc.
I think it also speaks a lot to the hype level for the core set, because this is a core set where we have a lot of powerful reprints. It's very reminiscent of the Magic Origins set, or like just the powerful core sets we've gotten before, where we just get these like very, very strong reprints and also very strong new cards. And so while people are sitting in Seattle waiting to play their Modern Horizons event, they're scrolling on their phone through Mythic Spoiler and being like, oh, Cavalier of Red card, whatever, I want to play that in my lands deck. Or, oh, this cool new Sora and I want to put my Vampire EDH deck. And people only have so much money to put into Magic products that there are people out there who would normally be buying Modern Horizons for the next 2 or 3 weeks who are already just putting up pre-orders for the core set.
Yeah, it's a weird set because, like, locally, they don't know what to charge for draft also. So, like, people aren't really drafting because they don't want to, like, pay a ton more. And
right, it's not a master set, but it's also not a master set, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like they're doing like really weird stuff with the draft locally, and I talked to some people, some other areas that like it just isn't being drafted anymore. And War of the Spark is so much fun to draft because you get a Planeswalker in every pack that people don't want to pay the extra for Modern Horizons, which is a little awkward. So like I haven't really had an opportunity to play any Modern Horizons Limited. So
I know, I got to play one sealed event locally with a friend of mine, and I know Corbin did one draft where he didn't pick a Ren in 6, which is why he can't pay his health insurance this month.
Well, he did take Goblin Matron, but at least he didn't win the draft, so...
Yes.
So there
Poor
you go. Good job,
Corbin.
It's important to note that the analog to this set is Battle Bond from last year. Yes. Battle Bond was basically released almost exactly 1 year ago. The difference is that Battle Bond was, you said the pack price. It was $4 a pack. $4 a pack versus $8 a pack, $7 a pack. So
I mean, the other difference is just like the legality, right? I mean, like these are cards where people are picking them up for Modern's most popular, or for Wizards' most popular, like Eternal format. It's people are picking up cards for 4-ofs, not 1-ofs, whereas Battle Bond, it's like, oh, I need my 1-of, what's the card? Greater Good, I need my 1-of Doubling a Season, I need my 1-of Road and Will, and this, it's like, I need 4 Hogaaks, I need 4 Force Negations, I need 4 Giver of Runes, the demand is significantly higher, so, I mean, these kinds of sets, as podcasters and as people who are in the finance community who receive questions about what to do, all of our answers are based on historical trends and data. We don't just make up, and we try not to just have random guesses as to what's going to happen and be like, I think this might be a thing. We use historical trends and data points to look back at previous examples of things Wizards has done that are in a similar vein, and then make educated guesses based on that. So we have Modern Masters is a great example. When the first Modern Masters in 2013 came out, people are asking us, oh, what do we do? What do we buy this card at? Do we buy Tarmogoyf? And the answer is generally sell Tarmogoyf because, I mean, it's getting reprinted, right? But then we saw that Tarmogoyf went up in price from 100 to 150, and we gained data points from that. And so as master sets continue to come out, we learn more and more from them. And as supplementary products came out, like Conspiracy, we learned from what Conspiracy 1 did to the market, right? We learned not to buy foil conspiracies. We learned the price trend of those reprints like Mirari's Wake and how they eventually rebound. But for Modern Horizons, this is another like brand new thing that Wizards did.
This is totally unprecedented. It's
yes.
the first set at this price point. It's the first set where they put out another set like this
directly past
spoiled.
standard, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, when Battle Bond came out, it's very, very easy for us to just say, hey, buy your Seedborn Muses at this price because they're not going to drop any further. They're going to go up. Buy your Doubling Seasons at this point because this is the time period when the Conspiracy-esque effect hits, and this is when Doubling Season will be lowest. Then it goes up. And then it's very hard for us to just say, like, maybe you buy Force of Negation at 20, maybe you'd sell Force of Negation. It's very difficult, but this is sort of the first data point that we get on our little spreadsheets where when they do Modern Horizons 2, and I'm almost positive they will, just based on how much this set has impacted the format, we'll have a lot better idea of what to do next set. TLDR, we're not computers. We are humans that make educated guesses based on data.
And based on the data, I kind of think we're basically at the floor for Modern Horizons. We tend to call peak supply when like the most packs are on shelves being bought. And I think when people stop drafting a set, that's time to start look at, that's when people are drafting it anymore. That's a good way to get packs into into circulation. And people have already basically moved on. They're either going back to War of the Spark or they're looking forward to Core Set 2020, which, the pre-release is next weekend. So I kind of think this might be like the floor on Modern Horizons. Maybe stuff drops over the next week, but like that's basically it. We're starting to see the stuff like Yawgmoth and Urza go up. Ren and 6 has already gone up. Some of my 5 under 5 picks have already, doubled. Like Giver of Runes is like $11. It was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so we were paying $2 on that card in DC.
So I really think, you basically, this is the floor. We were waiting to see what would happen, and I think everything's just going up a little quickly. And as much as everyone's like, oh, this is a printed demand set, when people stop drafting a set, a lot of the demand goes away. I'm sure you'll still be able to buy boxes of it, but I don't think they're going to do a huge wave that's like comparable to the first wave. So as much as people were saying, this is a print demand set, so don't expect the stuff to go up quickly. That's exactly what happened. People are already checked out on Modern Horizons. Those who got their Hogax paid what they paid, and nobody's really worried about it now. So yeah. I think anything under $10, like I wouldn't wait on it.
Yeah, print to demand does mean print to demand of the sealed product. There can be very high demand for singles and not as much high demand for a sealed product until the EV of the set becomes high enough to the point that it is worthwhile for vendors to buy boxes en masse and start cracking them.
Yep, and we're not quite there yet, but we're getting very close with the number of $40+ cards in the set. So it's a very good set. There's a lot of good cards, and like you said, this is, as much as it looks like an EDH set, sort of prima facie, there's a lot of 4 of stuff for Modern. Like, Giver of Runes goes out as a 4 of, so that helps too, because you're going to get 1 a box, maybe 2. So, I don't know, man. I don't want to say invest in boxes because I don't know enough about that kind of thing because I don't do it. But if you can find the stuff, the singles are only going to go up.
Yes. And going into 2020, I mean, the power level of this core set does seem to be higher and more akin to the old core sets. Not the old core sets like 9th and 10th edition, but this reminds me a lot more of like the M11s and the M13s, where you get stuff like Thragtusk, where you get cards like the Titans and Layla. You have very powerful cards. It's not just like Baby's First Magic set that's worthless. And, I mean, there's cards in this set that I genuinely like that are like, oh, this is actually a powerful card. Embodiment of Agades, I think, is very, very worth looking at if it even drops a little bit. I don't want to buy it at 5 as a speculatory target, but I mean, That's the Flying Death Touch Demon. It's 3 mana, but it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each different mana cost among non-land cards in your graveyard. And that's a text.
Yeah, and that's like, they said 2 and a black and 1 and 2 black is different mana costs.
Yeah, and I mean, what really gets me interested in this card is its depths in to how many different types of mana costs Wizards has made over the years. Like, hybrid mana is different than regular mana. So, like, Manamorphose is different than Grizzly Bear. Those are different mana costs. And, like, Surgical Extraction is different than Thoughtseize. So, like, those are the kinds of things that have me wondering about how this is the first time that they've played with that design space on a very low-costed flying big creature. And it's just a card that I really want to keep a close eye on, because maybe Play Design tested the hell out of it and deemed it not great. But they also printed Teferi Time Raveler and Karn the Great Creator, so shrug.
They also printed Polyraptor and a dinosaur, the Marauding Raptor.
Well, I think they knew about that one going out.
No, I think they messed up and they're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Do you really want to draw the game? Fine, whatever. So...
Because there was a thing in design, like, I remember when they talked about Polyraptor's design file, and they made, like, an asterisk, like, be sure to check every card that has an ETB trigger for this kind of thing. So, I don't know. But, I mean, Embodiment of Agonies is the demon that has me most looking at it very closely, because it just has a new mechanic that they're working with, and just based on the variety of mana costs that exist in Magic, like I said, like, Thoughtseize and Surgical Extraction are different mana costs than this, and this feels like it could fit into like a very Jund-esque, like, fair Magic deck where you have like Bloodbraid Elf as 1 mana cost, and then a bunch of other.
Well, think of a Jund deck. How many cards have the same mana cost as other ones in a Jund deck?
Right.
Like, are there any 2 cards that share a mana cost?
It's like Scavenging and Goyf are like the only ones that I can.
Yeah.
Inquisition, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push.
Yeah. But I don't know. This is just a card I like to keep an eye on, and I just figured I'd mention it.
I would love to, like, I think 7/7 flyers definitely need Death Touch.
Yeah.
So I mean, kill the 8/8 flyers that your opponent's blocking with. That's really important to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just probably like they had Menace on it and it was too good, right? Like, it's just the other.
Jesus, with Menace, yeah.
It's like Grave Titan having Death Touch. It's like, you already get 10 power for 6 mana. Stop whining.
Like, look, would you rather it had first strike? Crying, yeah. So, this, I was looking at Bishop of Wings today just because it's really dumb with Divine Visitation. Whenever an angel dies, you create a 4/4 angel. So if you have a sack outlet, you just go infinite, which I think is funny. But I don't think Bishop of Wings is good. Also, we like to look at cards that are going to push up other cards, and I think Sigarda's Aid is a card that could go somewhere because
I think it already did.
Yeah. There's a big old sledgehammer that equips for 8, but if you have Sigarda's Aid, you just play the hammer for 1 and it automatically gets equipped to a creature.
Yeah, you play your core duelist and kill them for 22 damage on turn 2 or whatever.
Yep, it's really stupid, and
but that's not. It's not good, but it's just something that you like. You probably have Sigarda's Aid in that bulk box from 4 years ago, where you just
when
have.
Everyone saw that card and was like, "This has potential," and then bought a bunch and then never did anything, and you went, "Ah, shit! It's probably in your spec box."
Yeah, I mean, and not even just a spec box, right? Like, when I'm at a GP, everybody brings up a fat pack box to me, and they say, this doesn't have anything in it, but could you take a look? And I say, sure. And every box has 1 Panharmonicon. It always has 1 Ring of 3 Wishes.
Heroic Intervention.
Yeah, Heroic Intervention's always in there. Just all the Kaladeshi and all the Cryptolith Rights usually in there, just that kind of stuff. And your Sigarda's Aids are in that box, and you want to pull them out and list them right now to people who are building this Jake deck.
I mean, people played the deck when it was like you were using the
Quest for the Holy Relic.
Quest for the Holy Relic to get Argentum armor.
Yep.
And this is pretty crazy compared to that.
And another thing about trends, I just talked about how we look at trends of previous sets to determine what happens with cards in current sets. Look at M19 and look at what happened with Crucible of Worlds, and then look at Leyline of the Void and Leyline of Anticipation and Leyline of Sanctity. Like, the Crucible of Worlds went very, very cheap for several months, and you had a very long time to pick them up, and now they're $1 billion. Yes, they're $1 billion because of new synergies with Ren and 6 and new synergies with Landfall, and a lot of very powerful interactions that have been printed in the past year, but that card was on an upward trend regardless of those printings or not, and so you want to look at that max supply set, max supply timeline with these 3 Esper ley lines. I have no idea if the red or green ones are great or not, but the Esper ones we know are great, right? These are reprinted for a reason, and so you're gonna have that price where 3 months from now, all 3 of these Esper ley lines are at their bottom, and everybody's getting real excited about the fall set, and that's when you want to just get your play set of ley lines, so you're not paying $45 3 years from now.
And there are going to be people at your LGS that are just like busting these rares and just like keeping them and like trying to just, oh, I don't care about leyline. What can I get for it? $3? Great. I just want to play another draft. And, they just sell out of this stuff. So if you want to either trade with those people or make arrangements to buy outside the LGS with that kind of stuff, you can get a lot of that stuff cheap because people just don't care about anything they're not going to play in any of their decks. So, at the time when people are drafting Core Set 2020, which will be cheaper than drafting Modern Horizons, I think a lot of the stuff, all of the reprint stuff, I think is good pickups for sure.
The closest analog to this would be just looking at Core 19. And that was not quite a year ago, right? Crucible is basically back to where it was. It's a little bit cheaper than where it was, but it's still it's certainly climbed quite a bit. And this was a card that had bottomed out at, I think I was paying as little as $5 or $6 on it at one point.
Yeah, I mean Scapeshift too, right? Like that went down to 7 or 8, and now it's 13. And now it's 13.
Yes,
because the people that wanted Scapeshift had to buy 4 of them. That's the thing. Like, there's a thing I call discovered demand, where like people that were priced out of a card entirely before all of a sudden can afford it, but like they need 4 of them, so they end up paying like, twice what they would have for a playset. They paid twice what they would have for like 2 copies, but they end up with their playset, and then 4 copies just disappeared, and the card rebounds way faster. So there's some cards that people think they'll never be able to afford. They get a reprint, they're like, oh, I guess I can't afford a Crucible, and then people that never wanted a Crucible before all of a sudden have 1 or 2, and new demand that wasn't there before just because people gave up on the card all of a sudden materializes, so the stuff grows even faster than you expect.
Yep.
Which I could see for stuff like Leyline of Sanctity, that like people are just like, I will never have those.
I really like that they brought back the cycle of color hosers in this set, like the Autumn's Veil, the Celestial Purge effect, and the color hosing effects, like the red card that just blows up Teferi. I think that Standard has missed those a lot of the past few years, and it's good to have just like 2 mana blow up Teferi, you can't stop me. I think those make for a healthy Standard environment, and I'm glad that Play Design seems to have a strong hand in manipulating effects like those and making sure that they stay in the format. In addition to like evergreen cards like Anticipate and like Negate or Disfigure, those are just effects that I'm glad to have. Ember Hauler, I'm happy to have back. That card was very strong back in the day.
Grafdigger's Cage, even though it upsets Aaron Campbell that it got reprinted, it's a thing. Some people really like the graveyard, and and Grafdigger's Cage is going to be like, I don't know how cheap it's going to get, but it's going to get too cheap. And I was like, oh, that just got reprinted. Like, just pick up every Grafdigger's Cage you can, probably, right? From people who just drafted.
It's also...
No, go ahead.
Grafdigger's Cage is the type of card that always sells well. It's kind of fringe. We generally only look at it as this is a good sideboard card across all formats, so that's another bonus for it. But these are things that people generally don't think about. People don't always think to de-sideboard their decks, pull them out. So generally when people buy them, they disappear. If you look at Rest in Peace, even though it's getting reprinted this weekend, I really don't see the price on it dropping that much, because that's a type of card that is, again, played in all formats. It's a fairly narrow but very powerful sideboard card. They're unlikely going to have a better white anti-graveyard card than Rest in Peace. And it's a card that, even though, again, it's being reprinted this weekend, I don't foresee it falling that much. It's never going to be like a $2 card, because people always need it. It will probably drop down an amount, and then in 5 days or whatever, when people forget that Gideon's spellbook was released, then the card will just start climbing again. Especially when people need to start thinking about modern and whatever graveyard shenanigans people come up with.
I have a PSA. I mentioned this on Twitter already, but if you play blue in your commander deck, you are obligated to play Agent of Treachery from now on, so that I can steal it with Gonti.
I mean, I really like Agent of Treachery.
I think it's a bulk rare, and it's going to be a bulk rare forever, but it's just going to be a very powerful bulk rare.
Yep, it's the kind of thing I like to do in EDH for sure. 7 mana's a lot, but hey, if you get blue...
When I first read it, I thought it said draw a card, not draw 3 cards. I was like, oh, draw a card every turn. That's neat. And then it's just... It's Ancestral Recall and Gonti. And I need you to play it so I can steal it and then take your other thing. And then while I also have your Soul Ring and your Signet, then I can start doing dumb things.
But I mean, Blatant Thievery steals a card from every other player. So you resolve Blatant Thievery after you put this into play and you automatically get it. And
then you do Conjurer's Closet things and you do... things like that, and then it's fun.
You know, a card that hasn't really caught on in EDH, but I like a lot is Crafty Cut Purse. I don't know, it seems kind of like a sideboard card, which doesn't exist in EDH, but
yeah,
man,
it's like Thief of Blood or Aether Snap or whatever, where like some people will play it in their exclusive metas because of a problem deck, but then it's not universal enough to be worth a 99 slot, I guess, in most circles.
Yeah, I just that one time where the person like has that big turn and you cut purse them, it's pretty brutal.
I like Fairy Artisans a lot. I think that card will continue to go up over time.
Yeah, that's that could really do with the reprinting, but they don't like to go back to the old stuff from the commander decks that much. All the stuff from the commander decks is like kind of reprintable when you think about it, but also like they really just tend to just push out new cards. So some of that stuff, like, it becomes real economical to just buy the whole deck when like a bunch of cards cross the like $7 threshold.
Yes. And that was my pick of the week a couple weeks ago, was the Peer Through Time Teferi deck, where if you keep your finger on the pulse of the cards in the sealed product, then you can be ready to buy the deck while it is still sealed on eBay or Amazon, while the price of the sealed product hasn't caught up yet. So like the Teferi deck has Teferi, Sapphire Medallion, Cage Sun, Thought Vessel, just all these crazy...
Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah, it didn't have Thought Vessel, but it had Cyclonic Rift, Rite of Replicate, just all these crazy effects, and then you just buy the deck for $70, you get $110 worth of stuff. So those are just the things you want to look for. Like, Ed's Breaking Bulk was Throat Slitter, right? So like, you look for the cheap Ninja Precon, and just... because nobody else is looking for it. It's just the thing that nobody else looks for. So when you look for that cheap Plane Chase deck, then you're like, oh, this is $20 and I get $35 worth of ninjas. Sweet.
Yeah, like, and sometimes it's like the worst deck, because like nobody wanted the
red-white deck,
the giant ones. Nobody really wanted the Saskia deck when everyone was trying to buy Traxa. Now the Saskia deck's got 3 $15 cards in it. So some of the stuff that like doesn't look playable at the time, in hindsight, it's going to look good. So like maybe, hey, what's like the worst one from the most recent set? Everybody was super hyped about the Ninja deck, but nobody was really that hyped about, I don't even know.
I'd say the Artifact one was the biggest letdown.
Yeah, probably.
Or the Jund one. The Artifact and the Jund ones were the two ones that people were very disappointed
Yeah, and
by.
the Jund one, it basically had Windgrace's Judgment, and that's about it. But like some of that stuff could go up, and that could look real good later, or it could just look terrible because like the last Commander set was pretty disappointing. So it's hard to know, but just definitely keep like sites like Goldfish actually keep track in real time of the cumulative value of everything. Like, if you go to the site, it adds up their current value, not their value at the time. So you can see kind of, like, what's in those decks. And if you're at, like, a Target and whatever company restocks those, like oh, we found a bunch of Commander 2015 decks. Here they are. And they're, like...
And they'll cancel your order!
Yeah, they're, like, $10 above MSRP or whatever. All of a sudden, there's, like, $110 in singles in there. You know, I've definitely I picked up like the Marin deck for like practically what it was 2 years ago. You know, so be on the lookout for stuff like that. You know, it's not just like the hobby shops and stuff like that. Sometimes big box stores restock some of that stuff just to sell out of it, and they're not going to charge $80 for an old Commander deck. They're just going to sell it for what they're supposed to, because how do they know? They're a target. Yeah. I feel like every time I talk for more than like 60 seconds, you guys just like tune out, and then I stop talking and you're like, what?
No, I mean, it was a good chunk of information, and
this is all stuff we've done. That's why we're talking about it. We've made money accidentally. I went to a Target and bought 25 Izzet versus Golgari decks because I made like a bunch of money at a GP, and I was like, what if I spent it all? And that looks good now. So do stupid stuff, I guess is what I'm saying, because it might look good later.
Speaking of stupid stuff,
I have a pick of the week that I put on the spreadsheet because we did not record this cast on Monday. We recorded on Tuesday, but we still updated the spreadsheet, which is something that people who go to Brainstorm or patreon.com/Brainstorm Brewery and subscribe at the $10 level. They get a spreadsheet that tracks all of our picks of the week and breaking bulk picks for like the last 2 years, and it says who's doing the best, me, and it says who picks the safest ones, Corbin, and that's information you can get before the cast comes out. So you can get the cast a little bit early, but you can also get our picks of the week like Monday. Pick of the week, pick of the week, pick of the week. Time for the pick of the week. So the card I picked Monday was Ob Nixilis the Fallen. Because I was like, hey, it's rebounded from Iconic Masters. And then I looked, and Ob Nixilis the Fallen is actually worth more now than it ever has been.
Yep.
Which is crazy. Well, I mean, as far back as like sites are tracking, I don't know if it was worth like $50 back when Zendikar was out. I don't even know.
It wasn't.
Yeah, right.
Spoiler alert.
But yeah, Ob Nixilis is not only like back to where it was before it was reprinted, it's above the price it was before. And this is just a dumb card like Lord Windgrace and stuff like that. But I also think Yarok decks are going to make this really dumb, because the landfall trigger now reads, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target player lose 3 life twice. If you do, put 3 1/1 counters on Ob Nixilis twice. So, having Panharmonicon as your commander is going to be dumb. And I like Ob Nixilis, and I think it goes up. But if we are looking at other Yarok cards, I think there are perhaps better cards to pick. So I'm going to give you guys a bonus pick of the week for listening to the podcast, because, Ob Nixilis is fine and all, but it is like the most expensive it's ever been right now. So if I had to pick something else on the basis of Yarok decks, I really like Sire Stagnation as sort of like a sleeper bulk pick, because that's another card that it's 6 mana for a 5/7. That's kind of clunky. We don't really think that its effect is worth 6 mana, but when you're getting double triggers on Sire Stagnation, it now reads, whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player exiles the top 4 cards of their library, and you draw 4 cards.
Does that work that way?
Yeah, it's whenever a permanent entering the battlefield would cause an ability on a creature on a card you control to trigger. It triggers twice.
Interesting. I wasn't sure if it was your control or not.
No, it's if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger.
Okay, cool.
So Sire Stagnation basically says they mill 4, you draw 4 every time someone plays a land.
Yeah.
So it's getting to the point where we're gonna have to figure out a way to kill your own Sire Stagnation before it decks you. But I think that's a good problem to have. Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Because you basically drawn whatever you need to draw.
Yep.
So that's it's under $2 right now. It's one of those cards where I was like, hey, could this be a budget consecrated Sphinx? And no, it's not. But I think with Yarok at the command zone, I think you're going to draw a lot of extra cards in that. Yep. I think whether or not it's good, people who are building Yarok decks are picking these up.
I've got a pick of the week here. It is based on the fact that there is a lot of speculation that we are returning to Theros within the next 365 days. There's a lot of Theros cards, Theros-based cards, I should say, in the core set 2020. There's a lot of speculation that Elspeth will be a strong bit of the theme, where her story of coming back from the underworld and all that. And I've got a bulk rare that was reprinted once in Commander 2018 in the enchantment deck. It is Herald of the Pantheon. This card is about as bulky of a bulk stock as you can get, because when it got reprinted, it was already a bulk rare, so the market price on it was around 16 or 15 cents. And it has slowly doubled to like 35 or 40 cents, which I know is such a big deal. But if we do just get another Theros set, and if we see a lot of Enchantment Matter stuff, and if we get a cool Selesnya or Bant or another more Enchantressy stuff just to follow up the 2018 decks, I don't think Herald of the Pantheon is a horrible place to put your money. I think they're worth, if you're digging through bulk rares, just setting them aside or paying quarters on them. And it's just another little penny stock that could seed like $1 or $2, and then it's just, as long as you bought them in quantity, it's fine.
Yep. I just did to you what you've been doing to me all episode, where you stop talking and then I just like leave a nice pregnant pause in there. So how do you like it?
I think enchantments are just, as a whole, obviously with the speculation, that's unfounded speculation, basically. Who knows if it becomes real, but enchantments are always perennial favorites. Like anything related to enchantments, they obviously have a whole spawn of EDH decks that come out from it, and those are types of cards that will always sell well no matter what. Yes. And I think with it being very, very low downside and like very good potential upside, I definitely like that one.
Well, you don't necessarily need to go back to Theros for enchantment stuff to pick up. I feel like Hall of Heliod's generosity could be hinting at something, because like enchantments aren't really doing anything in Modern, so either they're going to give us something in Modern, or EDH decks with Estrad just having been printed. Estrad's really dumb, by the way. With Estrad just having been printed, I think something's going to happen, right? Something's got to happen. We're going back to Theros. We called it here on this podcast.
Hall of Heliod's Grace was actually my pick of the week yesterday.
Hall of Heliod's Generosity?
Yes. Yeah, that card's dumb.
Obviously, it's much worse than Academy Ruins. Artifacts just have much more playability, and they're obviously going to end up in your graveyard much more than enchantments. But if we look at how expensive Academy Ruins is now, it's not unreasonable to think that Hall of Heliod's Generosity could go up as well in the future.
Well, I've actually considered putting Ortog into my Estrad deck, just to have one more way to kill them, and B, a way to not get completely pantsed by someone playing Merciless Eviction. You sack all your enchantments before they get exiled, and then you play something like Second Sunrise to get them back, or get them back slowly with your other enchantments, versus just getting completely wiped. So enchantments do end up in the graveyard in EDH for sure.
All right. Did you want to have a really quick pick of the week, Ed, before we close it out here?
Yes. I'm really, really high on Modern Horizons cards right now. I have two. One is a little more obscure. It is Throat Seeker. It is a vampire it's a 3-drop vampire that gives unblocked attacking ninjas lifelink. It's one of those things where it's obviously much worse than Throat Slitter, but just looking through all the ninjas, this is the type of card that I foresee in a year or two, if it does see playing casual EDH decks, ninja based decks, it's already ranked fairly highly up on the Modern Horizons EDH rec page. This could easily be a $2 card. I think buying them now and just scoring them away or pulling them out bulk and setting them aside is not an unreasonable thing to do. My actual pick is Force of Despair. It's a black force. That one is pretty cheap. It's only $1 right now. Fulls are only $9. I think it's a fairly fringe card, but this is a type of thing that you want to do in that you want to do in Modern. Free spells are proven to be very powerful. A free spell that kills almost anything unconditionally is also very powerful. I think this is good in, for example, against the Hogak deck. I don't think it's unreasonable to want to do what. I know one of the ways that they can win is by Laboratory Maniac. That's also, that's how the Neoform deck wins. The Hogak deck wins via Altered Dementia. Yeah, but being able to kill their Laboratory Maniac at instant speed is pretty good. If we have Through the Breach decks or whatever that become prevalent again, or Primeval Titan decks, this is a good way to kill those that you would otherwise be unable to kill with Dismember, Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, etc. I think it's just a matter of time before people start to pick up on Force of Despair. And if you compare it to all the other forces, most of them have already gained quite a bit of value, with the exception of the white and black one.
Yeah. Would Force of Despair get better if they unban Splinter Twin?
I think it's a free shot now that a lot of decks have an easy, free-ish way to do it. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that that's something they could do. It makes most creature-based decks much more fair, especially the degenerate combo ones.
Yep.
Yeah, this is just like good if they resolve, like a Collected Company or something like that too, or just like play a Bloodbraid Elf and get back a Vengevine and something stupid like that.
Yeah, also very good against Vengevines. Yeah, there's definitely no shortage of obnoxious creatures that come in, usually in multiples, that Force of Despair cleanly deals with. Worst case scenario, it's a 2-for-1 if you're desperate to kill something big against like Vengevine, Bloodbraid Elf, Dredge, bringing back decks like this is a good way to 2 for like 5 or something them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think we've hit the floor on Modern Horizons cards, and I think that we have effectively hit the floor of this podcast.
Did you have another pick?
He said it. It was Throat Seeker and Force of...
Oh, that's right. And then Heliod's Generosity
was his
which
pick.
is a card you picked last night on the podcast called Cartel Aristocrats, which you should be able to find on Cool Stuff Inc.
Yeah, and this podcast you can find on basically every podcast app. We can find us on YouTube, iTunes, all the various media platforms, Spotify we've been recently added to, and
we've recently been re-added to Stitcher. So.
Yes, we did fix all those technical issues, and we've got a lot of cool
but they
stuff
know that because they're listening to the podcast. Right, so
well, I mean, they might have audibled to a different listening app while Stitcher was down, and now they can go back to their favorite one. So that's good. Yep. And we
didn't talk about our Patreon much because we don't always have to do that. But I think for $1 a month, being able to join the Discord's good value. And in the Discord, we're going to tell you some exciting things coming up for the Patreon. We're going to completely revamp it pretty soon. We'll be making announcements about that. And that's all I need to say about it.
Yep. Completely revamping is a strong word. Slightly revamping.
We are completely improving every tier.
Yes.
So, nothing but value for our patrons. Thank you so much for patronizing. And thanks for listening, everybody. I've been Jason Alt. I've been joined by DJ Johnson and our other guest, Ed. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And thank you for sticking with us. Goodbye, everybody.
Have a good drive to work or home from work or gym session or whatever you're doing.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.